He stared at the screen for 15 minutes, then said, "I'm done." 2 years, thousands of hours, dozens of nights crying on my keyboard. And that was it. I stood there, breath-caught fingers trembling, watching him toss my heart aside like a boring commercial. "You know I don't like reading," he said with a shrug, as if my story was just words, as if my world, our world, I'd bled into every pixel, meant nothing. That night, something inside me cracked. I didn't scream, I didn't beg, I just shut the laptop. But I knew. One day when he finally saw the ending, he would break the same way I did. I stood in the hallway, barefoot, clutching the mug I'd made for him last Christmas. His name etched with shaky hands, a joke from our favorite game printed beneath. Player 2 has entered the chat. It was stupid, silly, but it meant something once. Steam curled from the tea inside, untouched. Inside the living room, Ryan was hunched forward, elbows on his knees, controller tossed aside. His brows furrowed, not in concentration, not in frustration, just disinterest, laziness, like watching someone skim a menu they never planned to order from. He had my game open on the laptop, the one I'd poured every inch of myself into. 15 minutes. That was all he gave me. "Yeah," he muttered, scratching his neck. "I'm done." The world froze. I blinked once, twice. My throat tightened. "Done." "What do you mean?" I asked, too soft, too careful. He turned his head slightly. "I mean, I've seen enough. It's not really my thing, babe. You know I don't like reading long stuff." A sharp silence fell between us. Even the digital ambient music playing from the game's forest scene couldn't soften it. "But you said you'd try," I whispered. I did. 15 minutes is trying. He leaned back on the couch, already reaching for the remote. And it's just not my genre. Not my genre. Like it was a random demo from a stranger. Like it wasn't a story I'd written with trembling fingers and sleepless nights built pixel by pixel, choice by choice. Like it wasn't about us. And he didn't even notice. I just thought, my voice cracked, you'd want to know what I made. He sighed like I was the one being unreasonable. "Lena, it's a game. And you know I'm not into these visual novel things. It's a lot of reading. I don't do reading for fun. I don't do reading." That line felt like a slap. "You read Reddit?" "Yeah, because that's quick stuff. This? It's hours, right?" "You want me to go through all the choices and endings? That's a lot. You don't have to finish it tonight," I said, begging to keep something between us from snapping. "I just wanted your thoughts. You know how much this means to me." He stood. "You're making this a big deal. I tried it. I didn't like it. Why are you acting like I committed a crime?" My hands clenched around the mug. The ceramic was warm, but I felt cold all over. He didn't see the hundreds of sticky notes that still lined the mirror in our bedroom, dialogue ideas, branching path sketches, emotional checkpoints. He didn't see the months I spent learning how to code, how to draw, how to compose just enough music to make the emotional beats land. He didn't know that one of the game's 3 endings was about him. And now he never would. "I'm not asking for a review," I said. "I'm asking you to care. Just pretend you care." His eyes narrowed. "Okay, now you're being childish." That word shattered something inside me. Childish. He'd never used that word on me before. Not even when I cried after my first failed prototype. Not even when I doubted my career and said I wanted to give up. Now, because I asked him to play the game I made with my whole heart, I was the childish one. You know what he said, already heading toward the hallway? "Maybe we need a break from this conversation. You're clearly emotional." Yes, I was emotional. I had every right to be. But he didn't want to deal with emotion. He wanted me small, quiet, convenient. A girlfriend who made cute games but never asked anything of him. The door to the bedroom shut behind him. And I was left there, standing in the same spot, holding a cup of tea he never drank, watching the cursor blink on the laptop screen where his save file, Ryan_player2, waited. 15 minutes. That's what I was worth to him. Later that night, I sat alone on the balcony legs, curled under a blanket laptop on my knees. I reloaded his save file and watched the choices he made. He skipped all the backstory, chose the shallowest path, refused to read any journal entries. He missed the part where the main character finds an old cassette with a message saying, "You don't know how hard I tried to be seen." He missed the symbol carved into the tree, the same one Ryan had drawn on our beach trip when he proposed we always be player 1 and 2. He missed all of it. Not because he didn't see, but because he didn't look. By 2 a.m., I sat in silence. The game screen was paused on the field of paper lanterns. Each one flickering in a breeze I spent 2 weeks animating by hand. In the center, the main character stood alone, waiting for a choice. There were only 2 options. Forgive and pretend it never mattered. Let go and walk into the unknown. I stared at the screen. And for the first time in months, I pressed continue, not for him, but for me. I did not cry that night. Not in the way you might expect. No gasping, no shaking sobs. Just silence. A slow erosion. The kind you do not notice until a part of you disappears and you cannot remember where it went. I sat in the dark until the sun threatened to rise. Its light creeping across the kitchen tiles like judgment. The mug was still there. Cold, abandoned. Just like me. Ryan didn't come out of the bedroom. Not to check on me, not to say goodnight, not to apologize. And that hurt more than anything. Because silence is not always absence. Sometimes it is punishment. A refusal to engage. A declaration of, I don't care enough to fix this. I had always known Ryan was emotionally reserved, but I used to call it quiet strength. I told myself that being with someone calm would anchor me, that it was better than drama. But now, that calm felt like apathy, and I was drowning in it. Around 7 a.m., I opened my laptop again, not to cry, not to wallow, but to remember. I scrolled through old development folders, the original sketches I drew on napkins, the voice memos. I left myself into the middle of the night when ideas struck. And then deeper, the private dev journal entries I'd hidden behind an encrypted folder. Entry hash 47. I'm terrified this story will only matter to me. Entry hash 68. He brought me soup today while I debugged. I think I cried more from that than the caffeine withdrawal. Entry hash 103. Ryan asked what my ending means. I told him it was about hope. I lied. It's about him. It's about how love can be felt deeply and still not be returned. I stared at that last line. And for the first time, I let the tears come. They were slow, warm, not violent. Just the quiet acknowledgement that something was breaking. And maybe had been breaking for a while. Mira called around 10. I did not answer at first. I almost let it ring out. But her name on the screen, her goofy photo of us in matching frog hats at the Indie Game Con, felt like an anchor. I picked up. Her voice was soft. You didn't post the teaser. She had helped me prepare the post, an animated GIF of the lantern field, a single caption, 2 years. One story, 1,000 choices. I was supposed to launch the game trailer this morning. I couldn't, I said. My voice came out hoarse. There was a pause. Did he play it 15 minutes? Jesus. Another pause. I did not have to explain. Mira knew. She always knew. You okay? She asked. I hesitated. I don't think he sees me, I finally said. She exhaled. Then let the world see you instead. I didn't eat that day. I didn't shower. I didn't sleep. I just worked. Something in me had shifted. Some part of me that used to bend, used to wait for Ryan to come around to apologize to Karen, finally stopped. By evening, the teaser post was up. I tagged no one. Mentioned no boyfriend. No soft caption begging for attention. Just the game. Just my name. Just my work. Within an hour, it was being shared by a few indie dev accounts. By midnight, a minor streamer with a decent following had retweeted it. And then, a direct message popped up from someone named Cassie Plays. Hey Lena, I stumbled across your teaser. I cried watching the lanterns. I don't even know why. When does it drop? I stared at the message. A stranger, crying from something I made. It felt like being seen for the first time in years. Ryan came out of the bedroom around 1 a.m. He rubbed his eyes, yawning. "You didn't come to bed." I didn't look up from my laptop. No. He walked into the kitchen, grabbed a soda, and leaned against the counter. Still upset, I paused, then turned to him. "You don't get to ask that like nothing happened." He raised a brow. "I just thought you needed space." "No," I said, voice sharper than I intended. "You thought ignoring me was easier than feeling guilty." He frowned. "Lena, come on." "Do you even know what the story's about?" He interrupted. He blinked. "It's fantasy, right? That lantern field kind of romantic?" I laughed, bitter and broken. "It's about a girl who spends years trying to preserve love after it's already died. About her begging the person she loves to see her before she disappears." His mouth opened, closed. He looked like a man realizing too late that the game he dismissed was a confession he never listened to. But I didn't want his regret. Not anymore. "I think you should stay with your brother this week," I said calmly. "Just until I figure out what I want." He didn't argue. He just stared. And finally, he left. I sat alone again. Same balcony, same night air. But this time, the silence felt different. It wasn't punishment. It was freedom. I used to believe love was made of grand gestures, midnight drives, mixtapes, flowers at the door. But now, I know love lives in pixels. In the way I placed a faint shimmer across the lake at night, just to mimic the way Ryan once described the moon. And how I coded dialogue choices to reflect the exact words we exchanged the night he first told me he loved me, or the time he forgot our anniversary, so. I built a hidden scene buried 3 layers deep, where the player stumbles on a forgotten celebration set for 2 untouched, echoing with silence. That was how I coped, how I preserved us, by turning heartbreak into narrative, by turning absence into atmosphere, by turning Ryan into a ghost that could never leave, because I had hard-coded him into every corner of my world. When I began developing Lanternlight, I didn't set out to tell our story, not consciously at least. At first, it was just a game, a post-apocalyptic fantasy about memory and survival. A player character who loses everything. They must rebuild not just their home, but their faith and connection. But somehow, every time I sat down to write, he crept in. His quirks, his phrases, the way he used to look at me when I talked about my dreams like I was both impossible and inevitable. I gave the main love interest his smile. I gave him his silences too. And I gave the player the option to stay or to walk away. At the time, I thought I was writing fiction. But now I realize I was preparing myself. It took a year to build the emotional backbone of the game. It took another to layer in the branching paths, the alternate outcomes, the memories the player could unlock only if they chose to listen. Some of the most meaningful scenes required the player to wait, not click, not skip, just sit, to mirror the experience of trying to reach someone who no longer wants to hear you. It was deliberate. Some might call it pretentious game design. But I didn't care. This was never for the market. It was for me. For the version of me still hoping he'd turn around and say, "I understand now." The week after Ryan left, I didn't cry once. I worked. I refined code, cleaned up audio bugs, added one last line of dialogue at the very end, only unlocked if the player chose every moment of compassion, even after betrayal. It reads, "I waited for you. Even after the story ended. Even when you stopped reading." It was the truest thing I had ever written. Mira came over 3 nights later. She brought takeout and a new pair of headphones she insisted I wear during the final scene testing. "You've been too close to it," she said. "You need to feel it fresh." I smiled. Let her take the driver's seat. Let her play. She cried halfway through. Not the ugly kind. The silent kind, when tears fall without permission. The pain is too familiar to resist. When the end credits rolled, she took off the headphones. "Lena," she whispered, wiping her cheeks, "this is art." For a moment, I couldn't speak. She looked at me, eyes sharp now. Does he even know what he walked away from? No, I said. But he will. The game launched quietly on a Friday. No PR team, no ads, no sponsors, just a post Lanternlight. A story about being seen. Available now. Within 6 hours, indie dev Twitter had found it. Within 12, streamers began to whisper about the game that makes you question who you loved and why. By midnight, the game was trending under #IndieDev. And buried among the hundreds of tweets, I saw one handle that stopped me cold. At Sam Holbrook, 91 Ryan's younger brother. His tweet read, "Just played Lanternlight." My chest hurts. I think my brother's an idiot. Underneath a screenshot, the scene in the lantern field, the moment when the main character lets go. And below that, a comment. Does Ryan know he's the reason this game exists? No reply, just silence. But in that silence, something shifted. The next day, Sam messaged me. He kept it short. I hope you don't mind, but I showed Ryan the game. He didn't say anything for an hour. Then he asked for a charger. He's been playing ever since. I stared at that message for a long time. My heart didn't race. There was no flutter, no hope, just stillness. Because I didn't make the game to win him back. I made it to understand why I lost him in the first place. 3 days later, a letter came in the mail. Handwritten. No return address. Inside a folded sheet of lined paper, Ryan's handwriting. You were right. I didn't see you. I saw the version of you that was convenient, easy, small. I didn't deserve the real one. But now I know what I missed. I finished the game. I saw everything. I cried. I'm sorry. At the bottom, a final line. If it's too late, I'll understand. But if you want to talk, I'm still player 2. I held the letter, folded it back, and placed it in a drawer I rarely open. Because some stories do not need sequels. They just need to end. Exactly where they were meant to. After Ryan's letter, I didn't write back. I didn't call. I didn't scream cry or whisper his name into the wind, like some tragic heroine from one of the visual novels he could never finish. I simply let the silence hold. Because not every apology deserves a door reopening. Some belong on paper, others in the past. But a strange thing happened after that letter arrived. My sleep changed. I used to lie awake replaying our arguments, our slow drift, the dead look in his eyes when I asked for understanding and got a shrug. Now, I began dreaming in code. Nested conditionals, branches, variables, scenarios where he stayed, where he played the game from the beginning, where he chose different dialogue ones that did not break me. In one dream, he found the cassette scene first and cried. In another, he reached the hidden ending no one else had discovered yet. And every morning, I woke up wondering, should I add one more path? I opened the project files again late one night. Not to revise, just to revisit. The character named C, modeled loosely after Ryan, had exactly 83 dialogue variations, depending on player empathy and past actions. It had taken me weeks to write balance and emotionally weight every branch, and yet I had never coded in a path where C apologizes with depth. Not once, because at the time of writing, Ryan never had. Until now, my fingers hovered over the keys. There was no obligation, no audience asking for it. Most players assumed C's arc was tragic by design, a commentary on relationships that fray because people stopped trying. But part of me, some quiet, gentle part that still believed in healing, wanted closure, not punishment, so I began typing. In the new version, the player can revisit the lantern field one last time. If they carry every memory, every journal entry, and never once chose bitterness, C appears, not to beg, not to undo the past, but to say, I should have seen you. I'm sorry for all the times I looked away. It was simple, earned, not melodramatic, just human. When I finished coding the final sequence, I saved the file as closure_event_final.json. And then I cried. Not because I missed him, but because for the first time, I no longer needed him to say those words in real life. He had said them where I lived now in the world I built, where words mattered, where choices carried weight. By week 2, the game had crossed 50,000 downloads. Streamers were making reaction videos, and I watched in awe as strangers sobbed at the same scenes I once wrote alone at 3 a.m., curled up on the living room floor with ramen and regret. Some wrote essays calling it the most emotionally honest visual novel of the year. One reviewer called it the breakup game that somehow stitches your own wounds as you play. Another just said I played this after my fiancée left me. And for once, I didn't feel stupid for still caring. It was surreal. But it was also healing. Not because they praised me, but because they understood me. Mira invited me to speak on a panel. An indie game showcase downtown, small venue, folding chairs, string lights, nothing fancy. But when I walked on stage, I saw them rows of people. Some in cosplay, others in faded hoodies, a few with tears in their eyes before I even opened my mouth. I spoke for 20 minutes about memory, loss, choice, about how we build whole worlds hoping someone will walk through them and say, "I see you now." When the applause faded, someone approached me during the quanda. A girl, maybe 19, purple hair, trembling hands. She held up her phone. On it, a screenshot. It was the final scene, the hidden dialogue from C that I had only recently added. "You changed this," she whispered. "It wasn't there when I played it the first time." I nodded. She smiled. It helped me forgive someone who never said sorry. But it also helped me stop waiting for them. I bit my lip, trying not to cry. She added, "So, thank you." That night back in my apartment, I stood at the window. The city lights flickered, restless and unaware of me. But for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel alone. The version of Ryan who lived in my code would always be there. But he no longer held my heart hostage. He was just a character now, a memory, a branch in a tree full of choices I had grown beyond. And I was still writing, not about him, but about me. A week after the panel, I woke to a barrage of notifications. Dozens of messages, hundreds of mentions, thousands of new players. Lanternlight had just been featured on the front page of a major game review site, one I had dreamed about for years, but never imagined I would see my name on. The headline read, "The indie game that quietly shattered everyone's hearts." The subheading made me pause. Created by Lena, a solo developer who turns grief into design, heartbreak into code. Grief. They were right, but I'd never said it aloud. I'd grieved Ryan, not like someone who died, but like someone who chose to leave while pretending they stayed. Someone who let the decay set in silently. And maybe worst of all, someone who expected me to stay small while they grew disinterested. But now, look how people were seeing me. Not because I shouted, not because I demanded recognition, but because I finally told the truth. That afternoon, I visited my parents for the first time in months. They didn't play video games. They barely understood what I did for a living, but my mom had framed the article. My dad had printed a tweet from some streamer with 2 million followers. "You made this?" he asked, tapping the page like it was unreal. I did. My mom stared at me. "Is it really about him?" I didn't need to ask who she meant. I nodded. She didn't scold me, didn't pity me. She just took my hand. "You always had to bleed for people to notice," she said gently. "But this time, you bled for yourself." The next day, Ryan texted. Not a letter, not a call, just a message. I finished it again, saw the new ending. I don't know if it was for me, but I felt it, every word. I stared at the screen, not because it hurt, but because it didn't. I no longer needed him to see me, because the world had seen me first. A week later, I was invited to speak at a game developers summit. I almost said no. Crowds still made me anxious. Attention still felt strange. But Mira convinced me. You don't have to perform. she said. Just tell the truth. That's all you've ever done. So I stood on stage under stage lights next to game devs, whose work I once idolized, and I told the story. Not the one about the code, the one about the love that faded, the loneliness that followed. The night I sat in silence, wondering if anything I built mattered. And the moment a single message I cried, watching the lanterns changed everything. I ended with a sentence I hadn't prepared. It just came. You do not need to be understood to create. But when you finally are, it makes the silence worth surviving. The applause didn't feel like praise. It felt like exhale. That night, I walked alone through the city. No headphones, no distractions. Just the hum of street lights, the thrum of late-night buses, the occasional stranger's laugh from a bar down the block. And I thought of the first day Ryan and I met. It was raining. We both reached for the same umbrella at the bookstore. I remembered how we laughed, how he offered to let me have it, how I said, let's just share it, and how we stood under it all the way to the train. Back then, I thought sharing meant forever. But sometimes, sharing means just that moment, and that's okay. When I got home, a package waited for me, no return address. Inside a worn copy of our favorite game, Shadow Garden, the one that first made me want to create stories. On the inside cover, Ryan had written, "You made me feel things I never knew how to name. Thank you for letting me into your world, even when I didn't deserve it." Tucked in the back, a receipt. He had rebought the game we once played together, the one he had once left to collect dust. I smiled, folded the note, and placed it in the drawer beside the first letter. Not because I wanted him back, but because I no longer needed the wound to define me. That night, I opened a blank document. Title, Inheritance Genre Narrative Puzzle. Theme, healing from love that did not kill you but left you limping. It would not be about Ryan. It would be about what came after, about the strength it takes to build something beautiful after someone walks away. There's a moment in every project where you stop building for the person who hurt you and start creating for the version of yourself who survived. Inheritance began that way quietly without announcement. Just me, my keyboard, and the echo of choices I no longer had to explain. It was not meant to be a sequel, but it was born from the ashes of Lanternlight. This time, the story wasn't about love lost. It was about what stays, about the emotional debris left behind the fragments we sort through when the fire goes out. The first mechanic I designed was a puzzle of broken dialogue. The player wakes up in a ruined house, words scattered on the floor. Fragments of conversations. You're being too sensitive. It's not a big deal. You always make things about you. Players can try to rearrange them into something coherent. But there's no perfect answer. Because sometimes closure doesn't come from clarity. It comes from realizing you no longer need the whole sentence to walk away. I didn't post about the new project, not at first. This was just for me. I wrote quietly, like someone healing in secret, but Mira knew. She always knew. "You're writing again," she said, one night dropping off Thai food and watching my screen glow. I nodded. "Is it about him?" "No," I said. Then paused. Not directly. She smiled. "Good, because he doesn't deserve another story." Ryan hadn't reached out since the last message. And I hadn't responded. There were no more letters, no surprises, no final scenes of reconciliation, just distance. But it wasn't hollow. It was clean, like a room finally aired out after a storm. There were still traces of him old code songs we used to listen to, memories in the margins of old notebooks. But they no longer pressed on my ribs when I breathed. They were just parts of the architecture now. Things I could walk past without bleeding. Weeks passed, then months. Lanternlight surpassed 100,000 downloads. It was nominated for a narrative award I never thought I'd be eligible for. I wore a black dress to the ceremony, hands trembling not from nerves, but from awe. I did not win, But when the presenter read my name among the finalists, I looked at Mira in the crowd, and she was crying harder than I was. Afterward, I stood outside the venue, heels in hand, champagne untouched. A young man approached me. He looked barely 20. He said nothing at first, just handed me his phone. On the screen, a message typed but unsent. I left her without explanation. Then I played Lanternlight, and I understood her silence for the first time. She never needed revenge, just to be heard. I stared at it, and a breath caught in my throat. Then looked at him. "She'll be okay," I said. "I know," he whispered. "I'm not asking for her back. I just needed to feel what she felt." And for the first time, I realized the game hadn't just spoken for me. It had spoken for her. And for every woman who had ever built a world for someone who wouldn't even play it. That night, I added a final chapter to Inheritance. One that could only be unlocked if the player chose solitude every time comfort was offered. It would not end in a relationship. No one would swoop in to make it all okay. Instead, the player would wake up one morning, walk outside, and find the world had quietly rebuilt itself while they were grieving. A single line would appear. "You did not heal by being held. You healed by holding yourself." Mira was the first to test the full build. When she reached the ending, she didn't speak. She simply hugged me. "Is it ready?" she asked. Almost. I still needed one thing, a final image, a symbolic object. I searched old folders, art concepts, even Ryan's old sketches. Nothing fit. Then I remembered. The mug. Player 2 has entered the chat. Still tucked in the back of my cupboard, chipped and faded, but intact. I scanned it, digitized it, and placed it on the final screen. Not as a tribute to him, but as a symbol of who I used to be. The girl who hoped love meant playing side by side. Now it meant something different. It meant building my own world and not waiting for someone else to log in. When Inheritance launched, I expected it to be quiet. Not in a cynical way, just peaceful. It wasn't designed for virality. There were no flashy mechanics, no loud hooks. It was a slow, reflective journey, a game you sat with, a mirror more than a window. I released it on a Sunday evening, posted a short trailer, and closed my laptop. Then I took a walk, just me in the dusk. No destination, no Ryan. By the time I got back home, Mira had texted 13 times. "Have you checked your mentions? IGN, Polygon, everyone. Lena, go look." My hands shook as I opened Twitter. The trailer had gone viral. But not because of me. It was because of a streamer named Alienfire, a well-known figure in the gaming space. Loud, charismatic, not exactly my target audience. And yet, he had streamed the entire game live. No edits, no commentary layered over the gameplay. Just silence. His webcam in the corner showed a grown man. Tattoos, beard, booming laugh, silent, holding back tears. At the final scene, when the player walks into the morning light, after choosing every path of solitude, he whispered, "I didn't know a game could tell my story." The comments section exploded. I didn't expect to cry on a Sunday night. She gave us the words we didn't know we needed. This game didn't heal me, but it let me start. And buried deep, one username stopped me cold at Rollaway 27 Ryan. He had commented only one thing. She was always telling the truth. I just wasn't listening. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. He had played both games now. He had read the code I had written in pain, and the one I had written in peace. Maybe finally he understood the difference. 3 weeks later, I got invited to speak on a podcast about emotional storytelling in indie games. The host asked me a question I hadn't prepared for. "Did you ever think about releasing the game anonymously?" I paused. Sometimes I admitted. But in the end, I didn't want to hide anymore. I've spent years making myself small so someone else could stay comfortable. I wanted to take up space for once. There was silence on the other end of the call. Then the host said, "That's powerful. We need more stories like that." I smiled. Not the performative kind. The quiet kind that starts in your chest and rises into your eyes. Mira and I celebrated with bad wine and great pizza. I still remember when you almost deleted Lanternlight, she said, poking my arm. I know I groaned. Don't remind me. You wrote 2 of the most emotionally resonant games I've ever seen, she said, suddenly serious. You didn't just survive that breakup. You made art from it. I looked at her. No, I said. I made art in spite of it. And that mattered more. Later that night, I received an email from a college professor in Sweden. She wanted to use inheritance in her syllabus on interactive narrative and empathy in digital media. I blinked at the screen, then reread it. Twice. There it was, empathy. The thing I had begged Ryan for. The thing I thought I had to earn, to twist myself into, to deserve. Now, strangers were studying the empathy I'd created, not for love, not for closure, but because it mattered. I went to the bookstore the next day, alone. It had been almost a year since Ryan and I stood in this very aisle, arguing about which graphic novel was better, laughing too loud, kissing between the poetry shelves, like no one was watching. Now I walked past that shelf and didn't flinch. Instead, I found a small linen-bound journal. On the cover, New Game Plus, I bought it. And I began to write not in code, but in ink. Day 1. I am not broken. Day 2. I am building without asking for permission. Day 3. I'm no longer writing for him. Day 4. I am not lonely. I am alone. There is a difference. Sometimes people ask me if Lanternlight and Inheritance were based on true events. I always smile and say, not exactly. Because once a story is told, it belongs to whoever needs it, not the person who caused the pain, but the one who carried it. And now, I carry nothing but peace. There's something sacred about starting over, not from scratch, not as if nothing ever happened, but as someone changed, wiser, quieter, stronger. That's what New Game Plus is, not a reset. A return with everything you've learned. Months passed. Spring gave way to a shy summer. The heat crept into the corners of my apartment, filling the kitchen tiles where I once stood frozen, watching the man I loved walk away from the game I built to keep him close. Now that same kitchen was warm for different reasons. A vase of sunflowers on the windowsill, a sticky note from Mira on the fridge, drink water, or emotional genius. My laptop sat open on the table, the new project blinking like a heartbeat. But this wasn't about grief or loss or forgiveness. This was about me. The person left behind in all the stories I'd written before, the quiet girl in the shadows, the narrator no one looked at, only listened to. Now she had center stage. I titled the project Echoes of Glass, a third-person narrative where the main character walks through a city made of mirrors and every reflection shows a different version of herself. Some stronger, some shattered, some smiling through tears. The player's only objective, to walk, to see, to finally look at herself and not turn away. I didn't announce this game either, not at first, but word got out. An article appeared titled, "The Dev Who Made Us All Cry Is Back." I rolled my eyes, laughed, but it was true. Except this time I wasn't writing for the girl who got left behind. I was writing for the woman who stayed. One night, Mira dragged me to a rooftop open mic. "You need to do something terrifying," she said. "You mean aside from releasing 2 soul-crushing games to the public?" "Yes," she grinned. "But this time, with your face involved." I resisted. But I ended up on that rooftop anyway, under string lights and stars, a mic in one hand and the crumpled journal in the other. I read a few lines. Not poetry, not quite. Just truths. I used to think heartbreak made me a better artist. Now I know it just made me tired. It's healing that made me brave. The applause wasn't loud, but it was warm. And for once, I didn't feel like I had to earn it. Ryan never reached out again. Not after Inheritance, not after awards, not even when I was featured in a small documentary about healing through interactive storytelling. And that was okay. His silence no longer wrote the ending for me. I had taken the pen back. One night, a fan sent me a letter. handwritten, folded in delicate paper, no return address. Inside they wrote, "I never got to tell my mom how much I resented the way she disappeared into herself after my dad left. But then I played inheritance, and I realized maybe she wasn't disappearing. Maybe she was surviving. There was no ask, no praise, just a thank you. And in that moment, I felt it. Not fame, not pride, but purpose. A year to the day after Lanternlight released, I hosted a live stream. No fanfare, no countdown. Just me sitting on a stool, hands in my lap. I read journal entries from development. I shared early sketches. I even showed the save file titled Ryan_Player2. And then I deleted it live. I don't need it anymore, I said softly. The chat lit up with hearts, crying emojis. But I didn't cry, because grief had finally stopped being the engine and started being the ground I stood on. After the stream ended, I sat on the balcony. Same spot, same view. But the girl who once sat here begging for love, waiting for someone to see her, she was gone. In her place sat a woman who had seen herself and decided that was enough. New Game Plus doesn't mean going back. It means going forward with everything still glowing behind you. Not baggage, but story. Not wounds, but memory. Not him, but me.